As from the soil sprang glory of branch and flower, as from the animal's life rose thinking man, a new epiphany appeared in her. A mind of light, a life of rhythmic force, a body instinct with hidden divinity prepared an image of the coming God, and when the slow rhyme of the expanding years and the rich murmurous swarmwork of the days had honeypacked her sense and filled her limbs, accomplishing the moon orb of her grace, self-guarded in the silence of her strength, her solitary greatness was not less. Nearer the Godhead to the surface pressed, a sun replacing childhood's nebula sovereign in a blue and lonely sky. Upward it rose to grasp the human scene, the strong inhabitant turned to watch her field. A lovelier light assumed her spirit brow, and sweet and solemn grew her musing gaze. Celestial human deep warm slumbrous fires woke in the long-fringed glory of her eyes like altar burnings in a mysteried shrine. Out of those crystal windows gleamed a wall that brought a large significance to life. Holding her forehead's candid stainless space behind the student arch, a noble power of wisdom looked from light on transient things. A scout of victory in a vigil tower, her aspiration called high destiny down, a silent warrior paced in her city of strength inviolate, guarding truth's diamond throne. A nectarous haloed moon, her passionate heart loved all and spoke no word and made no sign, but kept her bosom's rapturous secrecy, a blissful ardent moved and voiceless world. Proud, swift and joyful ran the wave of life within her like a stream in paradise. Many high gods dwelt in one beautiful home, yet was her nature's orb a perfect whole, harmonious like a chant with many tones, immense and various like a universe. The body that held this greatness seemed almost an image made of heaven's transparent light. Its charm recalled things seen in vision's hours, a golden bridge spanning a fairy flood, a moon-touched palm tree single by a lake companion of the wide and glimmering peace, a murmur as of leaves in paradise moving when feet of the immortals pass, a fiery halo over sleeping hills, a strange and starry head alone in night. Canto 2. The growth of the flame. A land of mountains and wide sun-beat plains and giant rivers pacing to vast seas, a field of creation and spiritual hush, silence swallowing life's axe into the deeps, of thought's transcendent climb and heavenward leap, a brooding world of reverie and trance, filled with the mightiest works of God and man, where nature seemed a dream of the divine and beauty and grace and grandeur had their home, harbored the childhood of the incarnate flame. Over her watched millennial influences, and the deep godheads of a grandiose past looked on her and saw the future's godheads come as if this magnet drew their powers unseen. Earth's brooding wisdom spoke to her still breast, mounting from mind's last peaks to mate with God's, making Earth's brilliant thoughts a springing board to dive into the cosmic vastnesses. The knowledge of the thinker and the seer saw the unseen and thought the unthinkable, opened the enormous doors of the unknown, rent man's horizons into infinity. A shoreless sweep was lent to the mortal's acts, and art and beauty sprang from the human depths, nature and soul vied in nobility. Ethics, the human key to imitate heaven, the harmony of a rich culture's tones refined the sense and magnified its reach to hear the unheard and glimpse the invisible, and taught the soul to soar beyond things known, inspiring life to greaten and break its bounds, aspiring to the immortal's unseen world. Leaving Earth's safety, daring wings of mind bore her above the trodden fields of thought, crossing the mystic seas of the beyond to live on eagle heights near to the sun. Their wisdom sits on her eternal throne. All her life's turns led her to symbol doors admitting to secret powers that were her kin, adept of truth, initiate of bliss, a mystic acolyte trained in nature's school. Aware of the marvel of created things, she laid the secrecies of her heart's deep muse upon the altar of the wonderful. Her hours were a ritual in a timeless vein, her acts became gestures of sacrifice. Invested with a rhythm of higher spheres, the word was used as a hieratic means for the release of the imprisoned spirit into communion with its comrade gods. Or it helped to beat out new expressive forms of that which labors in the heart of life, some immemorial soul in men and things, seeker of the unknown and the unborn, carrying a light from the ineffable to rend the veil of the last mysteries. Intense philosophies pointed earth to heaven, or on foundations broad as cosmic space upraised the earth mind to superhuman heights. overpassing lines that please the outward eyes but hide the sight of that which lives within sculpture and painting. Concentrated sense upon an inner vision's motionless verge, revealed a figure of the invisible, unveiled all nature's meaning in a form, or caught into a body the divine. The architecture of the infinite discovered here, its inward musing shapes captured into wide breadths of soaring stone. Music brought down celestial yearnings, song held the merged heart absorbed in rapturous depths, linking the human with the cosmic cry, the world interpreting movements of the dance molded idea and mood to a rhythmic sway and posture. Craft's minute in subtle lines eternized a swift moment's memory or showed in a carving sweep, a cup's design the underlying patterns of the unseen. Poems in largeness cast like moving worlds and meters surging with the ocean's voice, translated by grandeurs locked in nature's heart but thrown now into a crowded glory of speech. The beauty and sublimity of her forms, the passion of her moments and her moods lifting the human word nearer to the gods. Man's eyes could look into the inner realms. His scrutiny discovered numbers' law and organized the motions of the stars, mapped out the visible fashioning of the world, questioned the process of his thoughts, or made a theorized diagram of mind and life. These things she took in as her nature's food, but these alone could fill not her wide self, a human seeking limited by its gains. To her they seemed the great and early steps hazardous of a young discovering spirit which saw not yet by its own native light. It tapped the universe with testing knocks or stretched to find truth, mind's divining rod. There was a growing out to numberless sides, but not the widest seeing of the soul, not yet the vast direct immediate touch, nor yet the art and wisdom of the gods. A boundless knowledge greater than man's thought, a happiness too high for heart and sense, locked in the world and yearning for release she felt in her, waiting as yet for form. It asked for objects around which to grow and natures strong to bear without recoil the splendor of her native royalty, her greatness and her sweetness and her bliss, her might to possess and her vast power to love. Earth made a stepping stone to conquer heaven. The soul saw beyond heaven's limiting boundaries, met a great light from the unknowable and dreamed of a transcendent action sphere. Aware of the universal self in all, she turned to living hearts and human forms, her soul's reflections, complements, counterparts, the close outlying portions of her being divided from her by walls of body and mind, yet to her spirit bound by ties divine. Overcoming invisible hedge and masked defense and the loneliness that separates soul from soul, she wished to make all one immense embrace, that she might house in it all living things raised into a splendid point of seeing light out of divisions dense inconscient cleft, and make them one with God and world and her. Only a few responded to her call, still fewer felt the screened divinity and strove to mate its godhead with their own, approaching with some kinship to her heights. Uplifted towards luminous secrecies or conscious of some splendor hidden above, they leaped to find her in a moment's flash, glimpsing a light in a celestial vast, but could not keep the vision and the power and fell back to life. Some mind daring heavenly experiment, growing towards some largeness they felt near, testing the unknowns bound with eager touch. They still were prisoned by their human grain, they could not keep up with her tireless step, too small and eager for her large-paced will. Too narrow to look with the unborn infinite's gaze, their nature weary grew of things too great. For even the close partners of her thoughts, who could have walked the nearest to her ray, worshipped the power and light they felt in her, but could not match the measure of her soul. A friend and yet too great holy to know, she walked in their front towards a greater light, their leader and queen over their hearts and souls, one close to their bosoms, yet divine and far. Admiring and amazed they saw her stride, attempting with a godlike rush and leap heights for their human stature too remote, or with a slow great many-sided toil pushing towards aims they hardly could conceive, yet forced to be the satellites of her sun they moved, unable to forego her light, desiring they clutched at her with outstretched hands, or followed stumbling in the paths she made. Or longing with their self of life and flesh they clung to her for heart's nourishment and support, the rest they could not see in visible light, vaguely they bore her inner mightiness. Or bound by the senses and the longing heart, adoring with a turbid human love, they could not grasp the mighty spirit she was, or change by closeness to be even as she. Some felt her with their souls and thrilled with her, a greatness to be near her drew a high communion's force. So men worship a God too great to know, too high, too vast to wear a limiting shape. They feel a presence and obey a might, adore a love whose rapture invades their breasts, to a divine ardor quickening the heartbeats, a law they follow greatening heart and life. Open to the breath is a new diviner air, open to man is a freer, happier world, he sees high steps climbing to self and light. Her divine parts the soul's allegiance called, it saw, it felt, it knew the deity. Her will was puissant on their nature's acts, her heart's inexhaustible sweetness lured their hearts, a being they loved whose bounds exceeded theirs, her measure they could not reach but bore her touch, answering with the flowers answer to the sun they gave themselves to her and asked no more. One greater than themselves, too wide for their ken, their minds could not understand nor wholly know, their lives replied to hers, moved at her words, they felt a Godhead and obeyed a call, answered to her lead and did her work in the world, their lives, their natures moved compelled by hers as if the truth of their own larger selves put on an aspect of divinity to exalt them to a pitch beyond their earths. They felt a larger future meet their walk, she held their hands, she chose for them their paths, they were moved by her towards great unknown things, faith drew them and the joy to feel themselves hers, they lived in her, they saw the world with her eyes. Some turned to her against their nature's bent, divided between wonder and revolt, impatient subjects, their tied longing hearts hugging the bonds close of which they most complained, murmured at a yoke they would have wept to lose, the splendid yoke of her beauty and her love. Others pursued her with life's blind desires and claiming all of her as their lonely own, hastened to engross her sweetness meant for all. As earth claims light for its lone separate need demanding her for their soul jealous clasp, they asked from her movements bounded like their own and to their smallness craved a like response. Or they repined that she surpassed their grip, and hoped to bind her close with longing's cords. Or finding her touch desired too strong to bear they blamed her for a tyranny they loved, shrank into themselves as from too bright a sun, yet hankered for the splendor they refused. Angrily enamored of her sweet passionate ray the weakness of their earth could hardly bear, they longed but cried out at the touch desired inapt to meet divinity so close, intolerant of a force they could not house. Some drawn unwillingly by her divine sway endured it like a sweet but alien spell, unable to mount to levels too sublime, they yearned to draw her down to their own earth. Or forced to center round her their passionate lives, they hoped to bind to their hearts' human needs her glory and grace that had enslaved their souls. But mid this world, these hearts that answered her call, none could stand up her equal and her mate. In vain she stooped to equal them with her heights, too pure that air was for small souls to breathe. These comrade selves to raise to her own wide breadths her heart desired and fill with her own power that a diviner force might enter life, a breath of Godhead great in human time. Although she leaned down to their littleness covering their lives with her strong passionate hands and knew by sympathy their needs and wants and dived in the shallow wave depths of their lives and met and shared their heartbeats of grief and joy and bent to heal their sorrow and their pride, lavishing the might that was hers on her lone peak to lift to it their aspirations' cry, and though she drew their souls into her vast and surrounded with the silence of her deeps and held as the great Mother holds her own, only her earthly surface bore their charge and mixed its fire with their mortality, her greater self-lived soul, unclaimed, within. Oftener in dumb nature's stir and peace and nearness she could feel serenely one, the force in her drew earth's subhuman broods, and to her spirit's large and free delight she joined the ardent-hued magnificent lives of animal and bird and flower and tree. They answered to her with the simple heart. In man a dim disturbing somewhat lives, it knows but turns away from divine light preferring the dark ignorance of the fall. Among the many who came drawn to her nowhere she found her partner of high tasks, the comrade of her soul, her other self who was made with her, like God and nature, one. Some near approached, were touched, caught fire, then failed, too great was her demand, too pure her force. Thus lighting earth around her like a sun, yet in her inmost sky an orb aloof, as yet unlinked with the broad human scene, in a small circle of young eager hearts, her being's early school and closed domain, apprentice in the business of earth life, she schooled her heavenly strain to bear its touch, content in her little garden of the gods as blooms a flower in an unvisited place. Earth nursed, unconscious still, the inhabiting flame, yet something deeply stirred and dimly new. There was a movement and a passionate call, a rainbow dream, a hope of golden change, some secret wing of expectation beat, a growing sense of something new and rare and beautiful stole across the heart of time. Then a faint whisper of her touched the soil, breathed like a hidden need the soul divines. The eye of the great world discovered her and wonder lifted up its bardic voice. A key to a light still kept in being's cave, the sunword of an ancient mystery sense, her name ran murmuring on the lips of men exalted and sweet like an inspired verse struck from the epic lyre of rumor's winds or sung like a chanted thought by the poet fame. But like a sacred symbols was that cult. Admired, unsought, intangible to the grasp, her beauty and flaming strength was seen afar like lightning playing with the fallen day, a glory unapproachably divine. No equal heart came close to join her heart, no transient earthly love assailed her calm, no hero passion had the strength to seize, no eyes demanded her replying eyes. A power within her awed the imperfect flesh, the self-protecting genius in our clay divined the goddess in the woman's shape and drew back from a touch beyond its kind the earth nature bound in sense life's narrow make. The hearts of men are amorous of claykin and bear not spirits lone and high who bring fire intimations from the deathless plains too vast for souls not born to mate with heaven. Whoever is too great must lonely live. Adored he walks in mighty solitude, vain is his labor to create his kind, his only comrade is the strength within. Thus was it for a while with Savitri. All worshipped marvelingly, none dared to claim. Her mind sat high pouring its golden beams, her heart was a crowded temple of delight. A single lamp lit in perfection's house, a bright pure image in a priestless shrine, midst those encircling lives her spirit dwelt, apart in herself until her hour of fate. Canto 3. The Call to the Quest. A morn that seemed a new creation's front, bringing a greater sunlight, happier skies, came burdened with a beauty moved and strange out of the changeless origin of things. An ancient longing struck again new roots, the air drank deep of unfulfilled desire, the high trees trembled with a wandering wind like souls that quiver at the approach of joy, and in a bosom of green secrecy forever of its one love note untied a lyric coel cried among the leaves. Away from the terrestrial murmur turned where transient calls and answers mix their flood, King Aswapati listened through the ray to other sounds than meet the sense-formed ear. On a subtle interspace which rings our life, unlocked were the inner spirit's trance-closed doors, the inaudible strain in nature could be caught, across this cyclic tramp of eager lives, across the deep urgency of present cares, Earth's wordless hymn to the ineffable arose from the silent heart of the cosmic void. He heard the voice repressed of unborn powers murmuring behind the luminous bars of time. Again the mighty yearning raised its flame that asks a perfect life on earth for men and praise for certainty in the uncertain mind and shadowless bliss for suffering human hearts and truth embodied in an ignorant world and Godhead divinizing mortal forms. A word that leaped from some far sky of thought, admitted by the cowled receiving scribe traversed the echoing passages of his brain and left its stamp on the recording cells. O force-compelled, fate-driven earthborn race, O petty adventurers in an infinite world and prisoners of a dwarf humanity, how long will you tread the circling tracks of mind around your little self and petty things? But not for a changeless littleness were you meant, not for vain repetition were you built, out of the immortal substance you were made, your actions can be swift revealing steps, your life a changeful mold for growing gods. A seer, a strong creator, is within, the immaculate grandeur broods upon your days, almighty powers are shut in nature's cells. A greater destiny waits you in your front, this transient earthly being if he wills can fit his axe to a transcendent scheme. He who now stares at the world with ignorant eyes hardly from the inconscience night aroused, that look at images and not at truth, can fill those orbs with an immortal sight. Yet shall the Godhead grow within your hearts, you shall awake into the Spirit's air and feel the breaking walls of mortal mind and hear the message which left life's heart dumb and look through nature with sun-gazing lids and blow your conch shells at the Eternal's gate. Authors of Earth's High Change, to you it is given to cross the dangerous spaces of the soul and touch the mighty mother stark awake and meet the omnipotent in this house of flesh and make of life the million-bodied one. The earth you tread is a border screened from heaven, the life you lead conceals the light you are. Immortal powers sweep flaming past your doors, far off upon your tops the God chant sounds while to exceed yourselves thoughts trumpets call, heard by a few, but fewer dare aspire, the nympholepts of the ecstasy and the blaze. An epic of hope and failure breaks Earth's heart, her force and will exceed her form and fate. A goddess in a net of transience caught, self-bound in the pastures of death she dreams of life, self-racked with the pains of hell aspires to joy, and builds to hope her altars of despair, knows that one high step might enfranchise all and, suffering, looks for greatness in her sons. But dim in human hearts the ascending fire, the invisible grandeur sits unworshipped there, man sees the highest in a limiting form or looks upon a person, hears a name. He turns for little gains to ignorant powers or kindles his altar lights to a demon face. He loves the ignorance fathering his pain. A spell is laid upon his glorious strengths, he has lost the inner voice that led his thoughts, and masking the oracular tripod seat a specious idol fills the marvel shrine. The great illusion wraps him in its veils, the soul's deep intimations come in vain is the unending line of seers, the sages ponder in unsubstantial light, the poets lend their voice to outward dreams, a homeless fire inspires the prophet tongues. Heaven's flaming lights descend and back return, the luminous eye approaches and retires, eternity speaks, none understands its word, fate is unwilling and the abyss denies, the inconscient's mindless waters block all done. Only a little lifted is mind's screen, the wise who know see but one half of truth, the strong climb hardly to a low peaked height, the hearts that yearn are given 1 hour to love. His tale half told, falters the secret bard, the gods are still too few in mortal forms, the voice withdrew into its hidden skies. But like a shining answer from the gods approached through sun, bright spaces Savitri. Advancing amid tall heaven-pillaring trees, apparelled in her flickering colored robe she seemed, burning towards the eternal realms, a bright move torch of incense and a flame that from the sky roof temple soil of earth a pilgrim hand lifts in an invisible shrine. There came the gift of a revealing hour, he saw through depths that reinterpret all, limited not now by the dull body's eyes, new-found through an arch of clear discovery, this intimation of the world's delight, this wonder of the divine artist's make carved like a nectar cup for thirsty gods, this breathing scripture of the eternal's joy, this net of sweetness woven of aureate fire. Transformed the delicate image face became a deeper nature's self-revealing sign, a gold leaf palimpsest of sacred births, a grave world symbol chiseled out of life. Her brow, a copy of clear unstained heavens, was meditation's pedestal and defense, the very room and smile of musing space, its brooding line infinity's symbol curve. Amid her tresses cloudy multitude her long eyes shadowed as by wings of night under that moon-gold forehead's dreaming breadth were seas of love and thought that held the world, marveling at life and earth they saw truths far. A deathless meaning filled her mortal limbs, as in a golden vase's poignant line they seemed to carry the rhythmic sob of bliss of earth's mute adoration towards heaven released in beauty's cry of living form towards the perfection of eternal things. Transparent grown the ephemeral living dress bared the expressive deity to his view. Escaped from surface sight and mortal sense the seizing harmony of its shapes became the strange significant icon of a power renewing its inscrutable descent into a human figure of its works that stood out in life's bold abrupt relief on the soil of the evolving universe, a godhead sculptured on a wall of thought, mirrored in the flowing hours and dimly shrined in matter as in a cathedral cave. Annulled were the transient values of the mind, the body's sense renounced its earthly look, immortal met immortal in their gaze. Awaked from the close spell of daily use that hides soul truth with the outward form's disguise, he saw through the familiar cherished limbs the great and unknown spirit born his child. An impromptu from the deeper sight within, thoughts rose in him that knew not their own scope. Then to those large and brooding depths whence love regarded him across the straits of mind, he spoke in sentences from the unseen heights. For the hidden prompters of our speech sometimes can use the formulas of a moment's mood to weigh unconscious lips with words from fate. A casual passing phrase can change our life. O Spirit, traveller of eternity, armed for the splendid hazard of thy life to set thy conquering foot on chance and time, the moon shut in her halo dreams like thee. A mighty presence still defends thy frame. Perhaps the heavens guard thee for some great soul, thy fate, thy work are kept somewhere afar. Thy spirit came not down a star alone. O living inscription of the beauty of love mistled in aureate virginity, what message of heavenly strength and bliss in thee is written with the eternal's sun-white script? One shall discover and greaten with it his life to whom thou loosenest thy heart's jeweled strings. O rubies of silence, lips from which there stole low laughter, music of tranquility, star-lustrous eyes awake in sweet large night and limbs like fine, linked poems made of gold stanza'd to glimmering curves by artist gods, depart where love and destiny call your charm. Venture through the deep world to find thy mate. For somewhere on the longing breast of earth, thy unknown love awaits for thee the unknown. Thy soul has strength and needs no other guide than one who burns within thy bosom's powers. There shall draw near to meet thy approaching steps the second self for whom thy nature asks, he who shall walk until thy bodies enter close-bound traveller pacing with thy pace, the lyrist of thy soul's most intimate chords who shall give voice to what in thee is mute. Then shall you grow like vibrant kindred harps, one in the beats of difference and delight, responsive in divine and equal strains, discovering new notes of the eternal theme. One force shall be your mover and your guide, one light shall be around you and within, hand in strong hand confront heaven's question, life, challenge the ordeal of the immense disguise. Ascend from nature to divinity's heights, face the high gods, crowned with felicity, then meet a greater God, thyself beyond time. This word was seed of all the thing to be, a hand from some greatness opened her heart's locked doors and showed the work for which her strength was born. As when the mantra sinks in yoga's ear, its message enters stirring the blind brain and keeps in the dim ignorant cells its sound, the hearer understands a form of words and, musing on the index thought it holds, he strives to read it with the laboring mind, but finds bright hints, not the embodied truth. Then, falling silent in himself to know he meets the deeper listening of his soul, the word repeats itself in rhythmic strains, thought, vision, feeling, sense, the body's self are seized unutterably, and he endures an ecstasy and an immortal change. He feels a wideness and becomes a power, all knowledge rushes on him like a sea, transmuted by the white spiritual ray. He walks in naked heavens of joy and calm, sees the God face and hears transcendent speech. An equal greatness in her life was sown. Accustomed scenes were now an ended play, moving in muse amid familiar powers, touched by new magnitudes and fiery signs, she turned to vastnesses not yet her own, allured her heart throbbed to unknown sweetnesses, the secrets of an unseen world were close. The morn went up into a smiling sky, cast from its sapphire the moon floated, a luminous waif through heaven and sank below the oblivious edge of dream, night lit the watchfires of eternity. Then all went back into mind's secret caves, a darkness stooping on the heaven bird's wings sealed in her senses from external sight and opened the stupendous depths of sleep. When the pale dawn slipped through night's shadowy guard, vainly the newborn light desired her face, the palace woke to its own emptiness, the sovereign of its daily joys was far, her moonbeam feet tinged not the lucent floors, the beauty and divinity were gone. Delight had fled to search the spacious world. Canto 4. The Quest. The world ways opened before Savitri. At first a strangeness of new brilliant scenes peopled her mind and kept her body's gaze. But as she moved across the changing earth a deeper consciousness welled up in her, a citizen of many scenes and climes, each soil and country it had made its home, it took all clans and peoples for her own, till the whole destiny of mankind was hers. These unfamiliar spaces on her way were known and neighbors to a sense within, landscapes recurred like lost forgotten fields, cities and rivers and plains her vision claimed like slow recurring memories in front, the stars at night were her past's brilliant friends, the winds murmured to her of ancient things and she met nameless comrades loved by her once. All was a part of old forgotten selves. Vaguely or with a flash of sudden hints her acts recalled a line of bygone power. Even her motion's purpose was not new. Traveler to a prefigured high event, she seemed to her remembering witness soul to trace again a journey often made. A guidance turned the dumb revolving wheels, and in the eager body of their speed the dim masked hooded godheads rode who move assigned to man immutably from his birth, receivers of the inner and outer law, at once the agents of his spirit's will and witnesses and executors of his fate. Inexorably faithful to their task, they hold his nature sequence in their guard, carrying the unbroken thread old lives have spun. Attendants on his destiny's measured walk, leading to joys he has won and pains he has called. Even in his casual steps they intervene. Nothing we think or do is void or vain, each is an energy loosed and holds its course. The shadowy keepers of our deathless past have made our fate the child of our own acts, and from the furrows labored by our will we reap the fruit of our forgotten deeds. But since unseen the tree that bore this fruit, and we live in a present born from an unknown past, they seem but parts of a mechanic force to a mechanic mind tied by earth's laws. Yet are they instruments of a will supreme, watched by a still all-seeing eye above. A prescient architect of fate and chance who builds our lives on a foreseen design, the meaning knows and consequence of each step, and watches the inferior stumbling powers. Upon her silent heights she was aware of a calm presence throned above her brows, who saw the goal and chose each fateful curve. It used the body for its pedestal, the eyes that wandered were its searchlight fires, the hands that held the reins its living tools. All was the working of an ancient plan, a way proposed by an unerring guide. Across wide noons and glowing afternoons, she met with nature and with human forms and listened to the voices of the world. Driven from within she followed her long road, mute in the luminous cavern of her heart. At first her path ran far through peopled tracts, admitted to the lion eye of states and theatres of the loud act of man. Her carven chariot with its fretted wheels threaded through clamorous marts and sentinel towers, past figured gates and high dream-sculptured fronts and gardens hung in the sapphire of the skies, pillared assembly halls with armored guards, small fanes where one calm image watched man's life, and temples hewn as if by exiled gods to imitate their lost eternity. Often from gilded dusk to argent dawn, where jewel lamps flickered on frescoed walls and the stone lattice stared at moonlit boughs, half conscious of the tardy listening night, dimly she glided between banks of sleep, at rest in the slumbering palaces of kings. Hamlet and village saw the fate wane pass, homes of a life bent to the soil it ploughs for sustenance of its short and passing days that, transient, keep their old repeated course, unchanging in the circle of a sky which alters not above our mortal toil. Away from this thinking creature's burdened hours to free and griefless spaces now she turned, not yet perturbed by human joys and fears. Here was the childhood of primeval earth, here timeless musings large and glad and still, men had forborne as yet to fill with cares, imperial acres of the eternal sower and wind-stirred grasslands winking in the sun, all mid green musing of woods and rough-browed hills, in the grove's murmurous bee humming wild, or past the long-lapsing voice of silver floods like a swift hope out of the world's immense unhuman past. Tracked memories and ageless remnants came, domains of light and theft to antique calm listened to the unaccustomed sound of hooves, and large immune entangled silences absorbed her into emerald secrecy, and slow hushed wizard nets of fiery bloom environed with their colored snare her wheels. The strong importunate feet of time fell soft along these lonely ways, his Titan pace forgotten and his stark and ruinous rounds. The inner ear that listens to solitude, leaning self-wrapped unboundedly, could hear the rhythm of the intenser wordless thought that gathers in the silence behind life, and the low sweet inarticulate voice of earth in the great passion of her sun-kissed trance ascended with its yearning undertone. Afar from the brute noise of clamorous needs the quieted all-seeking mind could feel, at rest from its blind outwardness of will, the unwearied clasp of her mute patient love, and know for a soul the mother of our forms. This spirit stumbling in the fields of sense, this creature bruised in the mortar of the days, could find in her broad spaces of release. Not yet was a world all occupied by care. The bosom of our mother kept for us still her austere regions and her musing depths, her impersonal reaches lonely and inspired, and the mightinesses of her rapture haunts. Muse-lipped she nursed her symbol mysteries and guarded for her pure-eyed sacraments the valley clefts between her breasts of joy, her mountain altars for the fires of dawn and nuptial beaches where the ocean couched and the huge chanting of her prophet woods. Fields had she of her solitary mirth, plains hushed and happy in the embrace of light, alone with the cry of birds and hue of flowers, and wildernesses of wonder lit by her moons and grey sere evenings kindling with the stars and dim movement in the night's infinitude. August, exulting in her Maker's eye, she felt her nearness to him in earth's breast, conversed still with the light behind the veil, still communed with eternity beyond. A few and fit inhabitants she called to share the glad communion of her peace, the breadth, the summit were their natural home. The strong king, sages from their labor done, freed from the warrior tension of their task, came to her serene sessions in these wilds, the strife was over, the respite lay in front. Happy they lived with birds and beasts and flowers and sunlight and the rustle of the leaves, and heard the wild winds wandering in the night, mused with the stars in their mute constant ranks, and lodged in the mornings as in azure tents, and with the glory of the noons were one. Some deeper plunged. From life's external clasp beckoned into a fiery privacy in the soul's unprofaned star-white recess they sojourned within ever-living bliss, a voice profound in the ecstasy and the hush they heard, beheld an all-revealing light. All time made difference they overcame, the world was fibred with their own heartstrings, close drawn to the heart that beats in every breast, they reached the one self in all through boundless love. Attuned to silence and to the world, rhyme, achieved was the wide untroubled witness gaze, unsealed was nature's great spiritual eye, to the height of heights rose now their daily climb, truth leaned to them from her supernal realm, above them blazed eternity's mystic suns. Nameless the austere ascetics without home abandoning speech and motion and desire aloof from creatures sat absorbed, alone, immaculate in tranquil heights of self on concentration's luminous voiceless peaks, world-naked hermits with their matted hair immobile as the passionless great hills around them grouped like thoughts of some vast mood awaiting the infinite's behest to end. The seers attuned to the universal will, content in him who smiles behind earth's forms, abode ungrieved by the insistent days. About them like green trees girdling a hill young grave disciples fashioned by their touch, trained to the simple act and conscious word, greatened within and grew to meet their heights. Far-wandering seekers on the Eternal's path brought to these quiet founts their spirits' thirst and spent the treasure of a silent hour bathed in the purity of the mild gaze that, uninsistent, ruled them from its peace, and by its influence found the ways of calm. The infants of the monarchy of the worlds, the heroic leaders of a coming time, king-children nurtured in that spacious air like lions gambolling in sky and sun received half-consciously their godlike stamp, formed in the type of the high thoughts they sang they learned the wide magnificence of mood that makes us comrades of the cosmic urge, no longer chained to their small separate selves, plastic and firm beneath the eternal hand, met nature with a bold and friendly clasp and served in her the power that shapes her works. One soul to all and free from narrowing bonds, large like a continent of warm sunshine in wide equality's impartial joy, these sages breathed for God's delight in things. Assisting the slow entries of the gods, sowing in young minds immortal thoughts they lived, taught the great truth to which man's race must rise or opened the gates of freedom to a few. Imparting to our struggling world the light they breathed like spirits from time's dull yoke released, comrades and vessels of the cosmic force, using a natural mastery like the sun's, their speech, their silence was a help to earth. A magic happiness flowed from their touch, oneness was sovereign in that sylvan peace, the wild beast joined in friendship with its prey, persuading the hatred and the strife to cease the love that flows from the one mother's breast healed with their hearts the hard and wounded world. Others escaped from the confines of thought to where mind motionless sleeps waiting light's birth, and came back quivering with a nameless force, drunk with a wine of lightning in their cells, intuitive knowledge leaping into speech, seized, vibrant, kindling with the inspired word, hearing the subtle voice that clothes the heavens, carrying the splendor that has lit the suns, they sang infinity's names and deathless powers in meters that reflect the moving worlds, or, comrades of the everlasting will, surveyed the plan of past and future time. Some winged like birds out of the cosmic sea and vanished into a bright and featureless vast, some silent watched the universal dance, or helped the world by world indifference. Some watched no more, merged in a lonely self, absorbed in the trance from which no soul returns, all the occult world lines forever closed, the chains of birth and person cast away. Some uncompanioned reached the ineffable. As floats a sunbeam through a shady place, the golden virgin in her carven car came gliding among meditation seats. Often in twilight mid returning troops of cattle thickening with their dust the shades when the loud day had slipped below the verge, arriving in a peaceful hermit grove she rested drawing round her like a cloak its spirit of patient muse and potent prayer. Or near to a lion river's tawny manor and trees that worshipped on a praying shore, a domed and templed air's serene repose beckoned to her hurrying wheels to stay their speed. In the solemnity of a space that seemed a mind remembering ancient silences, where to the heart great bygone voices called and the large liberty of brooding seers had left the long impress of their souls seen, awake in candid dawn or darkness mooned, to the still touch inclined the daughter of flame drank in hushed splendor between tranquil lids and felt the kinship of eternal calm. But morn broke in reminding her of her quest and from low rustic couch or mat she rose and went impelled on her unfinished way and followed the fateful orbit of her life like a desire that questions silent gods then passes star-like to some bright beyond. Thence to great solitary tracks she came, where man was a passerby towards human scenes or soul in nature's vastness strove to live and called for help to ensouled invisible powers, overwhelmed by the immensity of his world and unaware of his own infinity. The earth multiplied to her a changing brow and called her with a far and nameless voice. The mountains in their anchorite solitude, the forests with their multitudinous chant disclosed to her the masked divinity's doors. On dreaming plains, an indolent expanse, the deathbed of a pale enchanted eve under the glamour of a sunken sky, impassive she lay as at an age's end, or crossed an eager pack of huddled hills lifting their heads to hunt a lair-like sky, or travelled in a strange and empty land where desolate summits camped in a weird heaven, mute sentinels beneath a drifting moon, or wandered in some lone tremendous wood ringing forever with the cricket's cry or followed a long glistening serpent road through fields and pastures lapped in moveless light or reached the wild beauty of a desert space where never plough was driven nor herd had grazed and slumbered upon stripped and thirsty sands amid the savage wild beast night's appeal. Still unaccomplished was the fateful quest, still she found not the one predestined face for which she sought amid the sons of men. A grandiose silence wrapped the regal day, the months had fed the passion of the sun and now his burning breath assailed the soil. The tiger heats prowled through the fainting earth, all was licked up as by a lolling tongue. The spring winds failed, the sky was set like bronze. Book 5. The Book of Love. Canto 1. The destined meeting place. But now the destined spot and hour were close, unknowing she had neared her nameless goal. For though a dress of blind and devious chance is laid upon the work of all-wise fate, our acts interpret an omniscient force that dwells in the compelling stuff of things, and nothing happens in the cosmic play but at its time and in its foreseen place. To a space she came of soft and delicate air that seemed a sanctuary of youth and joy, a highland world of free and green delight where spring and summer lay together and strove in indolent and amicable debate, inarmed, disputing with laughter who should rule. Their expectation beat wide sudden wings as if a soul had looked out from earth's face, and all that was in her felt a coming change and forgetting obvious joys and common dreams, obedient to time's call, to the spirit's fate, was lifted to a beauty calm and pure that lived under the eyes of eternity. A crowd of mountainous heads assailed the sky pushing towards rival shoulders nearer heaven, the armored leaders of an iron line, earth prostrate lay beneath their feet of stone. Below them crouched a dream of emerald woods and gleaming borders solitary as sleep, pale waters ran like glimmering threads of pearl. A sigh was straying among happy leaves, cool perfumed with slow pleasure-burdened feet faint stumbling breezes faltered among flowers. The white crane stood, a vivid motionless streak, peacock and parrot-jeweled soil and tree, the dove's soft moan enriched the enamored air and fire-winged wild drake swam in silvery pools. Earth couched alone with her great lover heaven, uncovered to her consort's azure eye. In a luxurious ecstasy of joy she squandered the love music of her notes, wasting the passionate pattern of her blooms and festival riot of her scents and hues. A cry and leap and hurry was around, the stealthy footfalls of her chasing things, the shaggy emerald of her centaur manet, the gold and sapphire of her warmth and blaze. Magician of her rapt felicities, blithe, sensuous-hearted, careless and divine, life ran or hid in her delightful rooms, behind all brooded nature's grandiose calm. Primeval peace was there, and in its bosom held undisturbed the strife of bird and beast. Man, the deep-browed artificer, had not come to lay his hand on happy inconscient things. Thought was not there nor the measurer, strong-eyed toil, life had not learned its discord with its aim. The mighty mother lay outstretched at ease. All was in line with her first satisfied plan. Moved by a universal will of joy, the trees bloomed in their green felicity and the wild children brooded not on pain. At the end reclined a stern and giant tract of tangled depths and solemn questioning hills, peaks like a bare austerity of the soul, armored, remote and desolately grand like the thought-screened infinities that lie behind the rapt smile of the Almighty's dance. A matted forest head invaded heaven as if a blue-throated ascetic peered from the stone fastness of his mountain cell, regarding the brief gladness of the days, his vast extended spirit couched behind. A mighty murmur of immense retreat besieged the ear, a sad and limitless call as of a soul retiring from the world. This was the scene which the ambiguous mother had chosen for her brief felicitous hour. Here in this solitude far from the world her part she began in the world's joy and strife. Here were disclosed to her the mystic courts, the lurking doors of beauty and surprise, the wings that murmur in the golden house, the temple of sweetness and the fiery isle. A stranger on the sorrowful roads of time, immortal under the yoke of death and fate, a sacrificant of the bliss and pain of the spheres, love in the wilderness met Savitri. Canto 2. Suchavan. All she remembered on this day of fate, the road that hazarded not the solemn depths but turned away to flee to human homes, the wilderness with its mighty monotone, the morning like a lustrous seer above, the passion of the summits lost in heaven, the titan murmur of the endless woods. As if a wicket gate to joy were there ringed in with voiceless hint and magic sign, upon the margin of an unknown world reclined the curve of a sun-held recess. Groves with strange flowers like eyes of gazing nymphs peered from their secrecy into open space, boughs whispering to a constancy of light sheltered a dim and screened felicity, and slowly a supining constant breeze ran like a fleeting sigh of happiness over slumbrous grasses pranked with green and gold. Hidden in the forest's bosom of loneliness amid the leaves the inmate voices called, sweet like desires enamored and unseen, cry answering to low insistent cry. Behind slept emerald dumb remotenesses, haunt of a nature passionate, veiled, denied to all but her own vision lost and wild. Earth in this beautiful refuge free from cares murmured to the soul a song of strength and peace. Only one sign was there of a human tread, a single path, shot thin and arrow-like into this bosom of vast and secret life, pierced its enormous dream of solitude. Here first she met on the uncertain earth the one for whom her heart had come so far. As might a soul on nature's background limbed stand out for a moment in a house of dream created by the ardent breath of life, so he appeared against the forest verge inset twixt green relief and golden ray. As if a weapon of the living light, erect and lofty like a spear of God his figure led the splendor of the morn. Noble and clear as the broad peaceful heavens a tablet of young wisdom was his brow, freedom's imperious beauty curved his limbs, the joy of life was on his open face. His look was a wide daybreak of the gods, his head was a youthful riches touched with light, his body was a lover's and a king's. In the magnificent dawning of his force built like a moving statue of delight he illumined the border of the forest page. Out of the ignorant eager toil of the years abandoning man's loud drama he had come led by the wisdom of an adverse fate to meet the ancient mother in her groves. In her divine communion he had grown a foster child of beauty and solitude, heir to the centuries of the lonely wise, a brother of the sunshine and the sky, a wanderer communing with depth and marge. A vader knower of the unwritten book perusing the mystic scripture of her forms, he had caught her hierophant significances, her sphered immense imaginations learned, taught by sublimities of stream and wooden voices of the sun and star and flame and chant of the magic singers on the boughs and the dumb teaching of four-footed things. Helping with confident steps her slow great hands, he leaned to her influence like a flower to rain and, like the flower and tree in natural growth, widened with the touches of her shaping hours. The mastery free natures have was his in their ascent to joy and spacious calm, one with the single spirit inhabiting all. He laid experience at the Godhead's feet, his mind was open to her infinite mind, his acts were rhythmic with her primal force, he had subdued his mortal thought to hers. That day he had turned from his accustomed paths, for one who, knowing every moment's load, can move in all our studied or careless steps, had laid the spell of destiny on his feet and drawn him to the forest's flowering verge. At first her glance that took life's million shapes impartially to people its treasure house along with sky and flower and hill and star, dwelt rather on the bright harmonious scene. It saw the green gold of the slumbrous sward, the grasses quivering with the slow wind's tread, the branches haunted by the wild bird's call. Awake to nature, vague as yet to life, the eager prisoner from the infinite, the immortal wrestler in its mortal house, its pride, power, passion of a striving God, it saw this image of veiled deity, this thinking master creature of the earth, this last result of the beauty of the stars, but only saw like fair and common forms the artist's spirit needs not for its work and puts aside in memory's shadowy rooms. A look, a turn decides our ill-poised fate. Wandering unwarned by the slow surface mind, the heedless scout beneath her tenting lids admired indifferent beauty and cared not to wake her body's spirit to its king. So might she have passed by on chance ignorant roads, missing the call of heaven, losing life's aim, but the God touched in time her conscious soul. Her vision settled, caught, and all was changed. Her mind at first dwelt in ideal dreams, those intimate transmuters of earth's signs that make known things a hint of unseen spheres, and saw in him the genius of the spot, a symbol figure standing mid-earth scenes, a king of life outlined in delicate air. Yet this was but a moment's reverie, for suddenly her heart looked out at him, the passionate seeing youth thought cannot match, and knew one nearer than its own close strings. All in a moment was surprised and seized, all in inconscient ecstasy lane wrapped or under imagination's colored lids held up in a large mirror of dream, broke forth in flame to recreate the world, and in that flame to new things she was born. A mystic tumult from her depths arose, hailed, smitten erect like one who dreamed at ease, life ran to gaze from every gate of sense, thoughts indistinct and glad in moon-mist heavens, feelings as when a universe takes birth, swept through the turmoil of her bosom's space invaded by a swarm of golden gods, arising to a hymn of wonders priests her soul flung wide its doors to this new Sunday and alchemy worked, the transmutation came, a swift and fated turning of her days appeared and stretched to a gleam of unknown worlds. Then trembling with the mystic shock her heart moved in her breast and cried out like a bird who hears his mate upon a neighboring bough.